Welcome back, folks, to the Get a Grip on Life podcast. On today's show, I have a couple musicians in studio. Musicians and entrepreneurs, always fun. But if you're out there and you are listening to this and you think, man, I've always wanted to start a podcast. I've always wanted to create some digital media for my business to help my clients learn more about my business or help them to understand what I do or just to get my opinions out there. Man, your opinion matters too. You got to go to getagripstudios.com. That's where we're sitting right now. And you don't even need to come here because we're fully virtual. That's right. You can do your podcast over the internet with whoever guest you want, up to 8 people in real time, live, and it's produced by a professional AV engineer right here in Toronto, Canada. So it doesn't matter where you are. But you start off by going to getagripstudios.com, folks. Welcome, guys.
Thank you for having us.
Yes.
So, not a long biography here. But Anton, tell me a little bit about Artful Vandelays.
Artful Vandelays. So it's a band that started in 2007. So that's 12 years ago. And we wanted to do this as our career. And at some point in 2013.
Why, are you crazy?
What's that?
Are you crazy?
I know, right?
Apparently,
we were young, stupid. And that was my focus. Like I quit school. I really didn't want to do anything else. That's what I wanted to do.
Make music.
That's it. And just write, record. That was my main thing. Playing shows was not my favorite thing, but I loved just making music. It was just therapeutic for me. And I met Kevin and I met a couple of other people who were in the band at the time, Amanda and John, who were like some of the founding members. And both of them left in 2010 to go to law school.
Okay. Sounds like a sensible choice.
Right, it was.
There were two smart people in the band.
There were two smart people, and then we lost them. So we had to replace them with people who are dreamers like ourselves. So, and then and after that, we played for 3 years with Braden and Brian. And at some point, it was around the time that I wanted to get married to my wife. And I thought, to be fair to her, I need to figure out a career.
Sure.
And so I told the guys, I'm like, look, this has been fun, but I can't do this anymore. And I think we were like, okay, that makes sense. And then I went on, found a career in audiovisual as a sales guy.
Sure.
And I did that for 5 years, and we got married. I have a 3-year-old daughter. And then just last year, almost exactly a year ago, my wife was telling me, she's like, you need to hang out with people because it seems like you're missing something in your life. And I reached out to Brian, and we hung out, and he's like, would you be interested in working on the band again? I'm like, well, I don't know how Braden and Kevin feel about it, but yeah, I would be. He arranged a meeting. We all got together. We sat at a table at Hurricanes, and we were like, let's do this. And then we started practicing every week for a year. We played our first show back in August, and it's like we can't look back now. It's like it's the smartest decision we did.
Why? What is it about it? What is it? Is it just the passion for music? Is it completion of your life in terms of what you want to do every day with it? What is it about?
It's a really good question. So. For me, I think the music was a thing that was always a part of my life. Since I was a little kid, I've been singing since I was like 4 or 5 years old. And I just stopped cold turkey around the 2013 time. Some people would have continued playing. I didn't play guitar or piano, sing at all. I just stopped. It was a thing I needed to do in order to focus on other things. Because I knew that if I did that, it was like a distraction for me. I almost wrote it off as like I wasted all of this time with music. So I just stopped. But then I realized that was like a part of me, actually, right? It's like cutting off a limb and thinking that you'll be fine. So starting to do it again, I felt more alive. Like, oh, this is a part of me that I'm remembering. So
How old are you?
I'm 36.
36.
Yeah.
So yeah, you mean you kind of you took some time off to start a family,
That's
to get
right.
married, to work, and you got into the grind.
That's right.
And then next thing you realize that your life is kind of incomplete.
That's right. Actually, the big surprising part, too, is that I'd always worked at jobs my whole life. I'd never been an entrepreneur. The band was my first foray into entrepreneurship because I would help promote the band. I would book all the shows, and I loved that part of it, right? And I lost that, too. And so after being in this band, like Kevin has been an entrepreneur for the last 5 years. He quit his job to start as a mixing engineer, and he's been freelance doing this. It is an inspiration to me. And in July, I finally had the courage to quit my job, start my own AV company. And that has been life-changing as well. So that's the other part, right? Like doing this band has inspired me to do other things in my life that have just been smart moves, you know. So.
You know what's funny about entrepreneurship is that I'm just take off my jacket here.
Get warmed up.
Hey, Scotty, you might tell him to throw on the AC out there for us. Go to the middle thing and throw on the AC because it might get hot in here because it's one of those weird days where it gets hot in here and then not out there.
Yeah.
It's really a tight room here, actually. But, you know, so I've been on an entrepreneurial journey for almost 20 years.
Right.
It'll be 20 years in 2020. And so I've done pretty good. Yeah. And so I was talking to my accountant and I said to him, he's like, well, you could just invest this money and this is the return you'd get. He also runs some various investment companies. Right. And it's like, the return from your work is this and the investment company is that. And then you'd be free to do this and that. And I sat back in my chair and I thought, it's not about that.
Right.
It's about the entrepreneurial adventure, man.
The process is what I don't know if you know Gary Vee at all, but he's been inspiring to me just in this process. But he calls it's about the process that you have. You like the work, you like the day-to-day, you like that. So it's not about achieving a goal and then retiring. What's retirement? Like, what are you looking forward to? Doing nothing?
That's a dead paradigm, man.
Yeah.
Like
how do you mean?
So like the idea of, so I'm 42. I don't know how you look about our age, Gen X guys, right? You're not quite, maybe you're a millennial
customers. Well, he's a little younger than I am, actually.
So I'm 33.
33. So, we have there's this model where people got a job and they worked maybe one or two jobs and then they had this saved up for retirement and they had their pension, right? And then when I was coming up, all the pension stuff collapsed.
Right. That's right. Yeah, right.
My brother's an airline pilot for Air Canada, so they still he was the last group hired that will have a defined benefit pension from Air Canada. Mm-hmm. And so all that pension stuff kind of collapsed and then the society moves on and all this sort of stuff. And, people are, what are the kids going to do? And what's going to happen in society? And, you have this sense of like, the idea of a secure job for life. And then you retire and you get put out to pasture and you play golf or you do, you golf in the summer and you curl in the winter with your friends. Yeah. That's a dead paradigm, man.
It's not there anymore. Exactly.
And
even less for kids now, like even more so,
It's interesting, man. I mean, it's the argument of global, like you go from being a musician to, globalization. Mm-hmm. Globalization or that idea of a global world or whatever sounded so great, but it seems like it's hurt the music business or it's hurt musicians in a way.
Depends. If you were at the top of it at the time, absolutely it hurt you. But for people who are coming up now, it's easier than ever because you can have a global audience without being signed to a label, without anything. You just have Instagram or you have SoundCloud or whatever you have. And then you have a global audience. Like it could be 1,000 people, but across the world. Like we have some fans in Japan that we had no idea.
Sure.
And we've never even been.
Can you monetize those? From an entrepreneurial perspective, can you monetize those fans? Like who cares if you have fans? I mean, I don't mean to be
I get it.
But there's a sense in which, okay, so you like my music. Did you buy it?
Right.
Right. And
so you can talk to this.
I was going to say, so that's what we're in the process of rediscovering after getting this band back together and treating it a little bit more like a business as opposed to just a dream, right?
Sure.
And it's not in the way that we're sacrificing or changing the way that our music is, but the way that we treat that and put it out in the world is something that we're thinking a lot about. And something that's super important to us now after getting back together is it's all about a sense of community in music. It's very important that you connect with people. You connect with the people who are interested in what you're doing, who like the music that you like. Mm-hmm. So, we're very much in the early stages of this. So as of yet, no monetization. But we played our first show. We're going to have our second. And, we want people to come to our shows. We want to introduce you to people that you've never met before, people who are going to have similar interests to you. We want to start building a community in that way. And that's the thing that can now expand beyond the scope of our local shows on the internet.
So it's like a movement.
Reach, right?
It's right. But that's what it's always been. Music has always been about a movement.
I don't know, man. I mean, you look at Guns N' Roses, for example, or Bon Jovi or someone like that. Okay, they sign a label.
Yeah.
And then they make music.
Right.
And they get rich.
Right.
If their music is good.
Because there was only 5 artists that time. You know
right.
what I mean?
But hang on a second here. Everything. Have you ever heard of a Pareto distribution?
I've heard of it. Yeah.
Pareto it's almost like a law.
Right.
Okay. And if you come to understand Pareto distributions, it's kind of like it's like, I don't know if you ever read any Richard Dawkins books. Do you ever read any Richard Dawkins, The God Delusion? I'm not a supporter of Richard Dawkins. I think he's a bit of I don't know. That's another
He's a bit
conversation.
pompous.
Yeah, he is pompous.
Yeah,
actually, that's what it
very
is.
pompous.
Yeah, that's what it is. There's like a there's a lack of humility there that I think offends people. In a sense.
It doesn't help to
No.
convince people of your point when you're talking to people that way.
Yeah, when you're speaking down to them
Absolutely.
in a way. Christopher Hitchens was the same way, I think,
Yes.
in some senses.
When you're so certain that you're right about things that are not 100%
You
proven,
can't be certain about things like that.
it comes across abrasive
Yeah.
sometimes.
yeah,
I
it
think
really
that's-
does. And I think the whole atheist, I think most people are in our society are agnostic,
Yeah.
right? They're like, okay, I don't know,
Yeah.
but I'm going to go and buy my groceries now.
Yes.
Or play my music and move on with my life. But people that are super passionate on either end of the religious spectrum,
Yeah.
it's almost like he is religious about his atheism.
That's right. Absolutely. It's a
And
religion.
it's offensive in the same way.
It's a
I've
religion.
actually used that exact same phrase before.
That is what it is,
describing
right? Because
yeah.
when you take, you're so certain that there is no God, you are religious about that idea, because a religious belief is one that you cannot prove,
Yeah.
but you hold as if it's true.
You act out as if you believe in God.
That's right.
And that's a healthy actually way to live. If you structured your life on that format. But so he always talks about having his consciousness elevated by Darwinism.
Right.
Okay, which is an interesting idea when you think about it. Actually is consciousness elevating when you think about, there's an earth and then you are amoebas and they grow into this thing and now you guys are playing music in a band. It's actually wild when you think about it, right? Like the extent of the billions of years and all that sort of stuff. If that's something you're buying into as a spiritual mode, because it's spiritual to him actually. When he says his consciousness is elevated by Darwinism, it's just, he's talking spiritually there.
Right.
But he won't say that, but that's what it is.
Right.
But a Pareto distribution actually will elevate your consciousness as well. So if you slice any form of reality, Pareto distributions always look like this. Okay? Right? So they always have this shape. And if you look at that's like a slice, right? And so what a Pareto distribution says, if you get the slice right, what you find is that 90% of the gains go to less than 10% of the people that participate in something.
Yes. That
Okay?
makes sense.
So no matter what the hierarchy is, if you get the sample size right, it'll always look
It's
like
true
this.
everywhere, yes.
It's true
Yeah.
everywhere.
I agree with you.
In communist countries and capitalist countries, it doesn't matter. The Pareto distribution holds. So soccer or something like that, or music. You say of all the people in the world that get that play music, less than 1% or 10% get paid to do it. Right? There's a Pareto distribution.
There's a lot of people getting paid. They're just not going to make paid the big bucks.
No. So hang on. So, but most people that play music don't get paid.
Don't at all. Exactly.
Right. So then you take that slice of people that get paid, and the same thing happens.
Right.
That a huge portion of the money
Yes.
goes to 10%, less than 10% of the people. And it keeps happening that way.
Jordan Peterson talks about
All the time.
That's right. Yeah. Right.
All the time. And he doesn't say this, but actually, if you start to look at the world this way, it elevates your consciousness.
That
You
makes
start to
sense.
see that,
makes sense.
oh my God, right? Like the world is broken up into these slices of
Yes,
reality,
yes.
right? So what you guys want to do with your band is you want to go from you want to move yourself in that Pareto
That
distribution.
makes sense. Yeah.
How do you do that?
It's an interesting question.
Do you know how to do it?
First of all, you need a strategy, and that's what we never
Absolutely.
had before. And I think we're developing strategies and constantly redefining the strategy.
Did you learn that from being an entrepreneur?
I learned it from sales. So before I was an entrepreneur, I worked in sales for as long as I can remember, right?
Sure.
And intention is a huge thing. And
Sure.
I've heard this so many times that it's never clicked. And one time it clicked, it just changed everything. The game was a different thing. So once you realize in a conversation, you pick up the phone and you call someone, if you're just doing it to do it versus I have this goal in my mind with this conversation, that's where I want this to go.
Sure.
Then it just changes the game, right?
Sure.
So intention is what changed for me, because I'm like, we're not just playing a show, guys. This is what we're getting out of this. We're imagining this, we're envisioning it, and that's what's going to happen. And it always works out that way, right? My wife tells me this. She's like, "You've always been this way." She's like, "You'll say something, you'll find out about some information, and you'll come up to me like, I learned this, this, and this, and I'm going to do this with this." And then 3 months later, you do it.
You know what it sounds like to me? You should listen to your wife more.
Absolutely. No, absolutely.
Yeah.
She knows me better than I know myself.
Yeah,
Yes.
knowing her, you're definitely right about that too.
Yeah.
You should. But
I hope she never listens to this. I'll be in trouble.
so I would say it all depends on the way that you look at things as well, right? When we started this band 12 years ago, our goal was, at the time, goal number one is get to the end of that slice, right? We want to be at that end of that slice. No intermediate goals. We're going to do our thing, and we're going to get to the end of that slice.
Yeah.
But what you need to do is break things down
That's exactly
and make stages along the way.
Sure, of course.
And realize that you don't necessarily need to be at the end of that stage to lead a fulfilled life, happy in what you're doing and what you're creating. You can be partway along that line and be fine as well. And if you keep pursuing, that's great. But there are realistic stages that you can get to as well.
That's called starting with the end in mind.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Right? So
Yeah.
what you do is you project yourself forward to the time when you're getting paid, whatever, let's say there's, for you guys, maybe 10,000 people in an auditorium listening to your music. That would be maybe an end, or maybe it's 20,000, whatever it is, and money or whatever. And then you work your way back from that to your first next logical step.
Because you can't get there without the small steps in between.
Yeah, for sure. It's no different than, it's funny, people come in here and they want to start a podcast. Right. So we actually reject people.
Interesting.
Because they'll come in here and it's like a bucket list thing for them.
Oh, they just want to get this off their...
90% of podcasts are just people. 90%. I throw around numbers sometimes, but whatever. The vast majority of podcasts are 1 or 2 episodes.
And then they never make it past that.
Go to Podomatic, Podcast Alley, wherever you want to go, and you'll see that.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Well, people have an expectation that they're going to put out 1 or 2 episodes, and all of a sudden there's going to be like thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of listens. But that's not the way that anything works in life, right? You're never going to put out one piece of content unless you're in that extremely rare end of that slice where something just happens to hit. But it's so unbelievably rare for that to happen that you actually need to build up that pile of content, and you need to expand and grow from there.
And what makes you think you're good at it?
That's the thing you don't know. You remember you talked with Dave Essel about that guy who sang Jesse's Girl.
Sure.
I love that story because he realized, he's like, I'm not the best musician, but I'm the one who had a plan. There are people who are just really good. They're amazing, but they don't think so. So they're not. As far as they're concerned, you know what I mean?
It's not. It's also about, there's fantastic. There's so many musicians. There's probably more great musicians today than there is in all of history.
Absolutely.
Like if you take all the musicians in the world today, there's probably more great musicians today than there is if you took everyone that died.
That's correct. Yeah.
But you think about what, say, like Johann Sebastian Bach did, or you take it what I was talking to Kristen Karma about this. I don't know if you guys listened to that episode, but like people seem to make music incrementally as they make music.
Right.
So they start with a beat and then they add this and all that. You take the great classicals. They made it up in their heads.
That's right. It was all there. Yeah.
Wrote it and then performed it with a 30 or 40 piece instrumental band. Not that they didn't practice, but they wrote the piece first. Yeah. So it's almost like, do we know how to make music today? And that's a question. And does the technology we have actually sort of stunt the creative process?
We actually talked about this. So over time, if you look at classical music to now, all music has been simplified. Simplified. Every iteration is more simple than the last. There's a reason for that, because now it reaches a bigger and a bigger and a bigger and a bigger audience. Do you think plebs, if you want to call it that, the masses were listening to classical music? Not so much. It was for the aristocracy, right? So it was a small group that was listening to it. That's why it was so complex. But as music becomes for a larger and larger audience, the complexity of it has to simplify.
That's interesting. Languages work the same way.
Exactly. Yeah, in terms of like you use one word that means 10 things.
Yeah.
Kids talking emojis now.
Yeah,
we realize this phenomenon. I'm like, did you know kids say fire? They don't say this party is fire. They say fire. There's an emoji. They don't use words. So that's true exactly with language as well. Everything gets simpler so that everyone can understand.
Did you ever read the book Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad?
Yes.
Okay, so I actually I took a course on Conrad and Lawrence, and I was forced to read every single book by Joseph Conrad and every single book by D.H. Lawrence. Right. Not a fun course.
No, I can imagine. Yes.
Some of those books by D.H. Lawrence, man, jeez. And this is before the really evolving of audiobooks, which make things way easier for people studying English lit today. But he talks about the beat of the Congo is the beat of the drum.
Yes. So it's primal.
It's primal,
dude.
right.
Yeah.
There's a beat to that that flows in things. So I, as much as I respect Drake as a businessman,
right? I do
as a businessman. Yeah. I think his music is horrible.
Well, horrible is a judgment call, and it's
my taste.
Yeah, exactly.
My taste.
Exactly.
Yeah, and but at the end of the day, you have to respect the fact. Again, he's I like some of his stuff. I don't like all of it, but you have to respect the fact that this guy changed a whole genre of music. He's breaking records for like most time spent on the Billboard Hot 100 constantly. It's like
but that's an anachronistic indicator now.
Sure.
You can't take the Billboard 100 in 2019 and compare it to 1977.
That's right, exactly. It would never have been on
absolutely not. But it's very interesting though that this guy has like basically the way that he's performed music changed the way that a lot of popular music went. Right, and if you look back over time, the bands that you think of as like the big iconic people did the same thing. And whether you agree with it or not, they did.
Michael Jackson in the 80s when Thriller came out, a lot of people were probably like, this is garbage music. But he changed music. He created a genre. Pop music didn't exist before him, right? And Drake is kind of doing the same thing. he kind of created this mumble rap genre.
Yeah, mumble rap. That's
for better or worse. I don't know. Yes.
There was some intermediate steps between to get there, but yeah. But this is all like a spawn.
Every song sounds exactly the same.
Right? Yeah.
But what it is, it's a cultural phenomenon, right? People catch onto these words and these ideas. And I get it. For me now, like listening to music, I know it was like that for you, but I stopped enjoying listening to music once I became a musician. Now it's all research. Now I'm like, what are they doing there? Why is that working? With the video, with the audio, with the sounds, with the bass. It's all just research. I can't sit and listen to music like my little brother does. That's why he's like my favorite audience. I'm like, what do you think of this? Because you like music. I don't like music anymore.
It wasn't playing music that caused that for me, but I've experienced a similar thing where I work full time as an audio engineer, like a freelance audio engineer. I record and mix music. Mm-hmm. And at the end of, a 10-hour day, which is the norm in my business, you kind of don't want to go home and just put on music to chill out to. It's like, been listening to this all day long. And so it takes you to a little bit of a weird place. But I find now and then, though, I just will come across something and it just sparks me out of that where I forget about all that. And that's the stuff that I can...
And it's usually the most different thing from what you normally listen to for me, right? Like I was listening to The Weeknd. I grew up on Radiohead, the Beatles.
Sure.
The Eagles, all of that classic rock, and obviously
Radiohead's not
classic rock. Well, it is now.
Maybe
it's the 90s, yeah, right. But
I hate the grunge era, dude.
I grew up with that, right?
I'm one of the biggest memories of my life is when Kurt Cobain killed himself.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And I always look at it like you had the Beatles, John Lennon was assassinated. I got Kurt Cobain who committed suicide.
Yeah, exactly.
That was huge, impactfully on my life,
Makes
dude.
sense. Yeah.
I remember I was on the bus and my buddy comes on the bus. He goes, "Whoa, did you hear about Kurt Cobain?" I'm like, "What happened?" He's like, "No, he killed himself." I'm
so
like,
were you in the grunge? Were you into grunge?
Oh yeah, for sure. I used to have the Converse and the cutoff shirts and untucked and all that. We were just talking
about this on the way up here. So I don't listen to Radiohead anymore.
Okay.
I love
Too depressing, man.
Exactly. I didn't realize that. I was depressed for a long period of my life.
That was a depressing time.
It was. Because
the economy was crap.
That's right.
Everything was falling apart, and the music represented that.
That's right.
Gen Xers were coming up, and they were squashed between, if you look at the differences in our population bubble, you have the boomers, and you have these millennial kids that it kind of goes like this. Yeah. We're kind of crunched, like Gen Xers, like guys like me. We came up, and it's like, the society was serving the baby boomers. Now it's serving the millennial interest.
It skipped you guys.
It skipped.
That's right.
It skipped us, right? And there's a guy who's going to start a podcast called Gen Existential, which is interesting, that we're working with him on it. But there's something to music which music. I always wonder, great men make history, or do history make men great? Mm-hmm. Does a generation make music, or does music represent the generation? Is there some play there? Mm-hmm. And what is it saying? What does the music that's popular to a generation say about the people in that generation?
No, I think that's a great point. I think they're definitely interrelated. It's like a chicken egg thing a little bit, but the music is not going to take off and become successful within a generation unless it connects with the people who are listening to music at that time. So in some way, the things that come out of it as successful things do have to be representative of that time, because otherwise they would never have connected with you in the first place. And really the difference between good music that takes off and good music that doesn't is the fact that it connected with people. Because like you're saying, we live in a time where there's more great musicians than ever. So why aren't we hearing all this ridiculously great music coming out all the time? It's because it doesn't necessarily matter how virtuosic or great you are, or how accomplished you are on your instrument or as a writer. If you can't translate that into a way that connects with people,
you need to represent something.
People want to feel something when they listen to your music, right? Mm-hmm. And you can be the best player in the world, but come across in a way where nobody even feels anything while you're playing, right? It's all about connecting to people on a level that they can relate to. And that's actually, I think, a new way that we're kind of looking at things a little bit now, more so than we did in the past, when we were just like, oh, these parts are great. This is going to make a great song because all these things come together and it's unique and different, but
presentation is what people actually remember.
So it's being unique and different is great. It's something that we value, I think, generally in music, but that can't be the end of it. You have to find a way to do that in a way that can still be very relatable to people and can make people feel things at the end of the day. Because that's what people are listening to music for.
It's to feel things, yeah.
It's interesting that, have you guys ever heard of Boyce Avenue?
Why does it sound... He had a YouTube channel.
They're a cover band.
Yeah, I remember this.
Okay, they're a cover band.
Yeah.
They don't. I mean, maybe they do write some of their own music.
Probably they do.
But they're super popular, man. And all they do is
guitar covers. And
and they sing and they're connecting with people emotionally. I think some of their versions of songs are better than the original artist version of songs. And I kind of got into them, but to me, it's kind of sad in a way that the generation that's the millennial generation in some ways is either has this mumble rap or is replaying their parents' music.
There's a lot of that going on now.
Yeah,
recreating their parent. It's like they're there to serve. It's like, yeah, I like the Beatles too, Dad. Let's go to the Paul McCartney concert together. Or so they're connecting with their parents, and not that's a bad thing, I suppose, but there's a tragedy in it in a way.
I feel like people have felt this way though through every generation, starting sometime in the early 1900s, where it's big bands started to come out, and the parents of that generation would have been thinking, such a shame that you're never going to get to know the classical greats. Like, why are you into this? It's so simplified. And then, it went down to jazz trios and quartets, and fans of the big bands are like, well, it's such a shame you're losing out on all this. And then rock band, which is simplification of jazz music.
Right.
And that generation who lived for the previous generation is thinking, it's such a shame that all you have is this. And I think that's continued on and on.
So I'm just getting old. That's what he's saying.
Well,
we're all getting old.
The part that's fascinating to me about this, though, is it keeps simplifying down, and now we're down to one person barely creating melody, just rhythm, like hints of harmony, hints of melody.
Yeah,
right.
But so how much simpler can you get? And at what point do you revert out of this? Because you can't simplify eternally. There's nowhere to go after a while. You're just going to be...
Yeah, right. It's going to be the beat of the drum, bro. It's going to go back to the Congo beat.
And I mean, we're getting closer to that all the time, where things are just rhythm driven. You're losing senses of melody and harmony in more and more popular music. There's much less harmonic movement. Melodies are getting simpler if they're there at all. Yeah. Like the mumble rap stuff. Like,
I think it's important to stop thinking of things as better or worse, just different, right? Once you think of it that way, you don't judge it, you just observe it, right? For instance, you were talking about the movement thing a long time ago. John Lennon, the Beatles, they were like one of the first to create a movement. They made the music about something outside of the music. There's that whole Woodstock thing. That was like around the era that it started.
Summer of Love.
That's right. It started that way. I don't know if they had a good idea of what they were, protesting, but
most movements don't even know their movements until after.
Until later, like retrospectively, right?
Yeah, for sure.
But the other thing is, I think they call them Gen Z. Gen Z. So that's the generation from 1996 to 2010, I want to say.
Yeah.
If you're familiar with TikTok, have you heard of this?
Yeah, sure.
So if you look at TikTok, that whole generation is
I have 4 Gen Z kids.
There you go. So you know all about this.
Sure, I know about TikTok.
So basically, these kids are now recreating like the 90s. So I went to a park with my daughter and my wife, and I saw all these kids who were like, maybe 14, 15. They're on skateboards wearing Nirvana shirts.
Sure.
And I'm like, this is like what I grew up with. What's going on, right? And they're adopting this in some ways. So like you're talking about, I think we're going to see a little bit of a change, right, in that generation. Maybe not in the millennials, but Gen Z, I see a lot of potential there. And what I want to do is have our music not just be for people of our generation, but for people who are younger, because that's what you want. You want people to carry the torch. You don't want to make music for your generation. You want to make music for younger people.
So I think that's something, again, that happens consistently throughout time, though, where it's, if you look at it when we were in school, like late 90s, early 2000s for me for high school, people were into like 70s music, like the ones who weren't into modern music. It was like late 60s, early 70s was kind of the thing that was in. And then over the past like little while now, probably almost 10 years now, like there's been an 80s influence again in modern pop music that's coming out. You hear all these hints at 80s, you see those bright neon colors, you see all that stuff. And that's just being recycled. And I've been predicting this for a while. I think I've said it to you too, that the 90s is just going to be next. It's going to be the next thing in line, because as much as the music's moving forward here, it keeps recycling the past and feeding itself back into it, like a little bit of a feedback loop. And so I don't think that's actually, I mean, that's a nice optimistic way to look at it. That like the 90s is the one that's going to stay this time.
No,
now that it's back, and it's going to be a lasting impact. But I think it's just the natural progression. We've seen the 70s, the 80s. Now the 90s are going to be the thing.
I can't wait.
It's the right distance away.
I'm so excited
time
for the recycling of mumble rap. What is that going to be like? Like 2042.
I don't think we can even fathom what popular music will be like at that point, and how it'll get recycled.
Are you excited for this, Mike?
It'll be down to just one guy playing a drum, and then every once in a while you'll hear
But there's, there's to me there's a lack of originality in some of this stuff.
Yes, but in some ways, how else can you be original? A lot of things have been done.
I mean, Led Zeppelin comes out, and turns out that the Whole Lot of Love and a lot of their songs were actually stolen from African American artists, and that's a tragedy actually for a lot of people of that generation. And you look at but I mean, when they came out hot, and it was ready to go. In some ways, there's even country music, in some senses, has an element of this. Here's the model. Talk about being drunk,
right?
And missing. Like, have you ever studied? So I'm a weird kind of guy. I read all kinds of different books. I love audiobooks because I can do it while I'm driving or whatever. Yeah. And so I went on a deep dive into a psychological theory called attachment theory.
Okay.
And attachment theory is like how people bond with one another.
Right.
So secure, stable people kind of bond in a way where they don't feel jealousy. They don't really get into jealousy and all that. And they have the most secure, stable lives. And when they get divorced, hey, we're friends still. Mm-hmm. We stand beside each other at the soccer game and all this sort of stuff. Yeah. But I've developed a theory when you read books about, and I'm not going to get too technical here with how it works, but there's like, outside of that stable range, there's people who are anxious and there's people who are dismissive. And those kinds of people are kind of attracted to each other in kind of like a sadomasochistic way. It's kind of like an emotional torture chamber.
That's so interesting.
Right? And you can, once your consciousness can be elevated by this as well. And you'll see people that are in these kind of torture chamber relationships. Uh-huh. And the second most stable marriage is a person that's severely anxious with someone who's very dismissive. Okay? It's really weird, dude. And they are attracted to one another because, anyway, so...
you can help balance each other out in some ways, too,
in some ways, yes. In a negative, torture chamber-ish, sadomasochist kind of way.
Could be.
Emotionally sadomasochist, right? So the person who's anxious just wants to be loved, but they actually don't want to be loved. They want to be rejected, and it's weird, and they go on these cycles, and you can see it. And there's something in music which is describing that phenomenon.
That's so true. Yeah. The pain that you feel.
Pain.
Why do you want to listen to Radiohead? There's a reason why you want to, right?
Yes, and these like love songs and like love me like you do. It's like it's like there's a desperation or a neediness in it.
That's so true.
Yeah, that's the fascinating part. So to bring it back to that Radiohead conversation, so I've actually found this for a long time. I enjoy Radiohead. I can listen to any of their songs and be like, wow, this is
Fake
a
Plastic
pretty great
Trees
song, right? I feel that way about almost every song I listen to, but through the entirety of my life, I've never been able to stomach more than 3 to 4 songs of theirs in a row. And I've been made fun of for this because Radiohead is iconic, and how can you not listen to a full album? Okay, computer, you can't listen to that full album. I'm I don't know why. It's always made me feel not good at the end of it.
Yes.
And so we talked about that, and I'm I never really consciously thought about it, but it is depressing music. And it's so that depressing music can bring you down, but it can also lift you up, right? If you're in a dark place, if you're depressed yourself, to realize that somebody else has experienced this and is going through it with you, that can actually lift you up. So it's an interesting thing.
It's really the attitude you take to it. That's what it comes down to.
It's really what art is.
Yeah.
No, right? You take from it what you see it as.
Yeah, it's like the group of 7 painters. I could see myself back at that meeting in 1917 when they got together and they're like, they have this thing called a chainsaw. What do you mean? Well, they have this thing called a chainsaw where they can cut down trees really quickly, and they're actually cutting down all the trees. And most people in Ontario don't realize that, all of Algonquin, the Kawarthas, all of southern Ontario was completely clear-cut.
Oh, really? Wow.
Really?
Like all the trees were cut down.
I didn't know that at all.
Yeah, most people don't know that, right? Wow. It's like, and the only reason I discovered that was because my father-in-law has a cottage in the Kawartha Highlands Provincial Park, and that's the holding tank for the Trent Severn Canal.
Right.
So those lakes get drained 10 feet every summer to fill the canal based on how much water is needed in the canal. Mm-hmm. This is an engineering project that took 100 years, blah, blah, blah. Long story short, never would be able to do it today. But the area beside his cottage is a bog. And as the water gets drained, these giant stumps are revealed.
Oh, right, the original tree stumps. Right.
And these stumps are I'm looking at these stumps and this is I'm there's no trees that big here.
They're huge.
Thick, not like BC big, but big white pines like this.
Yeah.
And there's no trees in the Kawarthas that are that big, right? Wow. And so you see this movement, we need to go paint this and record this beauty.
Oh, man.
Right? So you can see the movement starts like that, right? It's like, well, do you know that this is happening? What do you mean? They have this machine that cuts trees down really, really fast, man. Right. They're going to cut down all the trees up there. Right. We got to go up and paint this beauty because it's all going to be gone. Because you got to remember, if you went to Algonquin Park in 1870, it was clear cut.
Right.
It was an empty cut down trees everywhere, right?
So that's about the time frame that it's been regrowing since.
Yeah, so you have
1870-ish?
200 years of regrowth, right? So the forests are back, and no one would ever know that every white pine in that forest was cut down.
I had no idea. That's
wow.
wow.
I mean, most people don't know that. Think about how many trees that is, dude.
Yeah, it's a lot of trees.
Like, think about what a project that would be.
Think how old those trees would have been, though, too. Right.
Maybe 300 years old.
Right.
They're not BC level. They're not redwoods or
Right.
the big thick trees out west, but they're rain. So you think about that. Art starts in tragedy in some senses, or in describing a tragedy.
That's a really good.
There isn't a lot of music that, like, I mean, the Beatles kind of had, some songs in the beginning, but they were about the love process. But as they became more mature, that they got darker and darker and darker, man.
And that's when they got actually more profound.
Yeah, for sure, and deeper. Yeah. And you look, Guns N' Roses. All their songs are about love in some way, but like deeply troubled love. Mm-hmm. So that's what sells. Mm-hmm. But why?
It's interesting.
Like, why does that neediness sell?
Yeah.
Like, it's neediness. That's what it is. It's anxiety. It's neediness. It's desperation. It's wanting to be loved or accepted by the other person, and not having that creates this art.
Well, I think when you're in those moments in your life where you're feeling like where you're feeling a little bit down, or you're thinking about these tragedies, you're probably at your most vulnerable, and that's when you're most willing and looking for something to connect to. Mm. I mean, I'm just making this up off the top of my head right now, but this is where I'm kind of thinking, and it's like we always hear
this struggle. Yeah. I was like, man, all of our songs are really sad.
But that's what people want from you.
But we didn't want to do that, right? And so we're like, can we try to write a happier song? And inevitably, there would always be a bridge that went from whoop, and then it would come back up.
But in a way, that's what it is.
That's actually what
the group of seven was sad in a way.
Exactly.
There was a sadness. There was a loss in it.
Right.
Yeah. And that's what people looked at. Yeah. They wanted to see that in the art, and that's what's preserved by it.
But 5 years later, I am so much more optimistic than I was before. And so now I'm looking back, and actually I can be like, oh, this was a period in my life where all this stuff was happening, and it's still a part of my life. So I'm not going to wash that away. That's now a lesson learned, And that's why I like to frame, whenever we play these songs, I'm like, I don't want to give people the wrong idea. Like, don't latch onto this. This is just a blip. And then you get better, and you get better, and that's what my vision of like an album would be, is a story, right? And that's what albums are supposed to be like. You think about it.
They don't do albums anymore. Nobody does an album.
The medium is gone.
I never even liked Led Zeppelin until I bought a record player.
It makes sense, right?
And I put on Led Zeppelin 1. I'm like, man.
Do you remember that experience? That was a different thing. That doesn't happen anymore.
Well, you buy it. You can buy it. You can buy a record player. And then you have to put it on. It's a lot of work.
Yes.
You can't skip easily.
Exactly.
It's like there's something to technology which wrecks us in a way.
Yeah, makes everything too easy.
Yeah, it's like, I can skip that. I don't like the way this sounds. I'm going to go to the next song or whatever.
You're not actively listening anymore.
No, that's what I feel like. Yeah, it's the fact that nobody consumes music like that anymore actually also is a reason why it's gone in the direction it's gone a little bit. Mm-hmm. So when you were listening to a record and you would put it on, and you were tethered by the headphones if you're listening in your room, or you were, if you had it on speakers, you still had to stay close because you're going to have to go flip that thing over in 15 minutes,
Sure.
Like, you're involved and you're listening and you're taking in that experience and actually appreciating what's going on. Nowadays, music is consumed in a way where it's secondary to whatever else is happening. I'm putting on music because I'm driving, or I'm putting on music because I'm studying. I'm putting on music because I'm cleaning my house.
People are using it to tune out, not tune in.
Exactly.
That's right.
Exactly.
Right.
Yes.
That's a good point.
That's a great way to phrase it. It's now simplicity is what goes along well with wanting to tune out. If you start doing complex changes in music when somebody's trying to tune out, that's going to take them out of it. And like, oh, why is my concentration being dragged away?
Sure.
From what I'm currently focusing on. That's not what people want anymore.
Do you guys know the Counting Crows?
Yes.
August and everything after. Mm-hmm. Okay, my favorite songs on that are Not Around Here or Mr. Jones.
Mm-hmm. The big ones.
It's The Circus Has Fallen and Sullivan Street, which are deeper on the album.
Right.
Right, and you would never listen to that, and today you would never get to that music, right? Mm-hmm. And I think his name is Adam Duritz, is the lead singer of Counting Crows.
Why are those your favorite songs?
They're just special to me, man. Like, I'd listen to the album, I'm like, that one kind of sounds good, but I forgot what song it was. You put the album on again, you're listening to it, you're actively listening. It's like, what the circus? I'm not gonna try to sing it. The circus is falling down on its knees. The big top is tumbling down. I remember that, and I listened to that song over and over again. I'm like, this is a great song.
Do you have a memory attached to that song?
So here's the thing. I'm gonna tell you something. I have a creative process where each point in my life where I had major crises,
Yeah.
whether it was personal relationship crisis, business, working on something in business, I would listen to the same song over
Interesting.
and over and over and over and
That's so
over and
interesting.
over again
Right.
at different points. So I could even name the songs,
Yeah.
right?
And this
the
is one of
songs-
those songs, probably.
Yes.
Yeah, there you go.
Yes. And I would listen to that song over and 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 over again and it would just help me solve my problem.
Yeah.
I don't know. It would put me in a zone where I focused on, a particular issue of a business or with a relationship or something. And so, but those songs were discovered they weren't popular songs. They
Right.
were songs that were discovered and they became mine in a way.
That's right. You took ownership of it. Exactly.
Yeah. It's like the idea Oscar Wilde has that the critic is the artist.
Interesting. Yeah.
It's an interesting. He wrote
Yeah,
a piece on that the critic as artist,
Yeah.
the person who consumes the music or the person who looks at the art gets to tell you what it means, not the creator.
It's like these blogs nowadays, right? Like, Pitchfork was a big one when I was like a kid. They basically would rate an album out of 5 stars. And if it got 5 stars, that means everyone was listening to it.
Mm-hmm.
So they were basically the purveyors of what is good music. And it's still like that a little bit today, right? There's Spotify playlists. It's
There's
always
always
been that way.
tastemakers
Exactly.
to some extent.
Tastemakers.
That's right.
Okay.
That's what it is, right? So it's not about the art itself. It's what the tastemakers can make it bigger. And what used to frustrate me when it was 2013, part of why I quit, was that I would see this. I would see there's like companies, I'm not going to name the names of them, but they would basically be media companies. They would take these bands that were their friends and just make them really big. And I'm like, it's not that their music is good or better than ours. It's just that they were friends with these people.
Sure.
And I'm like, we have to either do that or we have to make friends with these people. And I'm like, this is an endeavor I'm not interested in right now. And that was the uphill battle. But now I'm looking at it from a business perspective where I'm like, no, we can create the movement ourselves. We are the movement. We don't need anyone else. Like, obviously you need people. All we need is the people who are our friends. They'll automatically, like at our last show, all of our friends were just like, how can we help? And that's just, I love that, it's just, that's how things get bigger and expand, right? But yeah, I mean, that's how music has always been. That's how business has always been, right? If you had a friend, you get them a job, they become the executive of your company before someone who might have been actually better suited or more talented, right?
Sure.
Because that's how people are, right? You know them, you help them, you work with them. So that's life, you know what I mean? So instead of being mad about it and being like upset, like why is it like this? Why is it rigged? It's like, no, what can I do?
That's a waste of time.
Exactly. And I spent so much time wasting my time. Like
Yeah.
that,
So
right?
a lot of people like even you watch things in society, and you see like people on the left and the right,
Yeah.
expressing resentment towards something.
Exactly.
Waste of time.
Absolutely. Agreed.
Waste of time.
Yeah.
Like this guy, I follow this guy on Twitter. So I put out I have a business that recycles a lot of light bulbs. So light bulbs contain mercury and fluorescent tubes. So I was very passionate about that, and I started a business, and we're doing great with it. But so I know a lot about light bulb recycling, and because of that, I know a little bit about PCBs, polychlorinated biphenyls, are in old ballasts and whatever, and I've had a lot of experience with that. So I put out a video about how to identify a polychlorinated biphenyl ballast, right? And I said there's 5 characters. I can't remember what they are, but one of them is the smell.
Right.
And this went kind of viral in a sense within the marine biologist community.
Interesting.
Because marine biologists are very concerned about PCB contamination in the oceans because, orcas and large mammals in the ocean become contaminated with PCBs as they eat the smaller fish, right? So she texted me back, she messaged me, and what do PCBs smell like? I'm like, I don't know, but I just know what they smell like.
Wow.
Like if I look at 2 ballasts and they look the same, I'll just go, I know that's a PCB ballast for sure.
Can anyone else do that?
I'm sure, if I taught you to smell it, you would understand the smell.
Interesting.
You would say it has a
Smell's a weird thing to teach, though, right?
Yes, it's like it has a smell to it. There's a smell to that toxic chemical that's in there.
Right.
So I'm taking some in when I smell it. Like PCBs are entering my body when I do that.
I see. That's different.
Right.
Okay.
So that's what you're getting. You're getting there's something being released from it. But anyway, so she asked me how it smells. So I ended up getting hooked up into that community. We followed each other or whatever.
Yeah.
And there's so many posts within that. I had to disconnect from it. There's so many posts in that community about plastics in the ocean. Okay. Which is a concern.
Right.
Right. I understand the concern. But like just the end of days kind of stuff.
Yeah. It's like then you're not going to do anything about it, I guess.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Like go do something about it.
Exactly.
If you're that passionate about it, don't lament it. Don't sit in the greatest country to ever exist in the world in the history of mankind with the most freedoms and the least amount of negativity, like racism, sexism, all this kind of stuff.
It's all better than it's ever been.
Better than it's ever been.
Right.
And sit there and focus on negativity that you're doing nothing about. It
know.
bothers me a little bit.
I think it gives them solace or some sort of like, I don't know what it is, but it's not
But
healthy.
that's what
It's not
sells
healthy.
in art, though, in a way.
But there's a way
Could
that you
be.
can trick yourself into feeling like you're happy by jumping onto certain things like this. We had a conversation a little while ago that actually kind of changed the way I think about things a little bit, where he was asking me what I thought happiness was and how to define it. And I didn't really have an immediate answer, but I started to think about things. I started considering, what do I do in my life that I enjoy? And I started realizing this is the next leap that I don't know is easy to get to. Things that you enjoy don't necessarily make you happy. That's not always a direct connection. So an example,
Like cocaine, for example.
Exactly,
yeah, that's a
right.
great example.
Right.
Well,
Well,
the
doesn't make you
example for me
happy.
was, so I'm the kind of guy, I actually kind of enjoy debating, and I would get like, I will debate people who have like hard left or hard right views. It doesn't matter what side I'm debating. I'm happy to just take the other side,
Sure.
just to
Kevin
kind of
and I
test them out.
because I like to suss out their points and see
Yes.
like what good arguments they have.
Yeah.
But then I would end up getting sucked into it, and like even though I have no emotional attachment, I would start like just getting into it because I kind of enjoyed the thrill of debate.
Sure.
And in that moment, absolutely, I thought I was enjoying it. I'm like, this is cool. I'm getting other people's viewpoints. But I never once at the end of a day where I spent debating somebody went home and was like, going to sleep, this was a productive day. I just spent all day debating. Like that's not what happiness is.
I'm going to cut in. This is my favorite saying.
Yeah.
Debate is the only sport where if you learn the only way to learn something is to lose, or
That's
if you
right.
lose, you learn something.
There you
So
go.
it's like this. There's this disconnect where it's like, oh, I learned something, which means I lost.
So the only podcasts that are good are the ones Scott jumps in on. Because that means it's interesting. No, I'm serious.
We were chatting with Scott.
All right.
earlier. He's very
Yeah.
interesting.
If Scott doesn't jump in, it means it's not an interesting conversation.
We were talking about all kinds
So I
of
got a
things.
good signal. We're doing good. So, but there's something intoxicating about adversarial conversation.
Yes. Absolutely.
It's
It can suck you
intoxicating.
in,
It sucks
yeah.
you in, right?
And
But
like-
it's like a drug that's not good for you.
And
though, right?
you can start out
Yes.
feeling impartial, but you just get sucked down that road of like just wanting to be right a little bit. I think it's an innate response to kind of go that way, and it's very hard to step outside yourself and just
I remember one day Kevin
permanently
said to
take
me,
things in.
So like after the band had broken up and like a couple years ago, he said to me, he's like, "You've changed, Anton. We used to argue about things like this and you'd be into it. Just like now you're just like, okay, and just moving on." And that's what it was. I made that realization too, where it's like I would have these arguments with my little brother, and they were good sometimes, but most of the time we would just go down this road, and we both felt terrible at the end of it.
Yeah, for sure.
And so it's like, how is this helping us? But I'm like, oh, but
That's a form of codependency.
that's right. That's right. But then afterwards, we just tweaked a couple of little things, and now we're like, we want a positive outcome at the end of this. If we're not like pointing in that
Sure.
direction, we just steer off, right? And I think we're all trying to do that as a band. We didn't used to be able to have productive conversations. We're getting so much better at this.
Yeah.
It's just like these are things you can learn. It's not like you are this way and you will be forever. You can learn and get better. And that works with relationships, with my wife, with all relationships. I feel like they've just been getting better and better and better.
So so there's a couple points that we're away from music, but we're doing a
Yeah,
podcast.
right,
So who
right,
cares, right?
right.
So I think people enjoy negative emotions. I've come to the point now where I feel like, when I'm talking, so I've had, we all have our struggles through life, and there's people that you talk to that where it's always a negative conversation. You know what I'm talking about.
Yep,
right?
absolutely.
And I think there's something about wallowing in. Oh, Jesus! I thought I put it on silent. Sorry about that, guys.
No worries.
There's something that people where they wallow in their own negativity or in envy or greed. Like people love to wallow in envy. Like they love, like Schadenfreude is such an interesting thing to watch.
Right.
I've never understood the emotion of Schadenfreude. You know what that is?
Yeah,
That
it's
German
a German
thing?
word. They have
Enjoy
like
the
this-
decline, watching the decline
That's
of someone.
right.
Like glee,
Yes.
the glee of watching someone else fall.
Yeah, yeah.
The best example is probably when Tiger Woods
Right.
had his collapse.
Culturally, there was this entire show.
Yeah, like a
exactly.
cultural Schadenfreude. Mr. Perfect goes
Yeah,
down,
yeah.
right? And there's like
Makes you feel better about yourself.
the first time I ever felt it, and I caught myself. Like I'm not an envy guy. I don't have a lot of envy. I have other issues, but
Everyone
envy,
has it in them.
right.
It's about
So
whether
when
you
that
say yes
brown
to it.
face thing came out,
Right, with
I
Justin
was
Trudeau.
so wallowing in Schadenfreude. I was like, "Yo, this looks so,
That's so
good
funny,
on you, man." I
that's
was just
interesting.
like, "Oh yeah, take that." But then after the next day, I was like, man, do we have to go to that point?
That's where everything is going now.
Just
man.
like,
You know,
culturally, anyway.
why is that the The fact that these are the main conversations that are going to determine who's going to run a country.
Come on.
That's the worst
That's
part
the stuff
about
that
it.
drives
That's the
me
worst
nuts
part
more than
about it.
We
anything.
can do
Exactly.
so
It's
much
like,
better
There's
than
more
that.
important conversations to have, and I'm not saying dismiss this completely. Let's address it. Let's make sure that people understand that this is not behavior that you should be engaging in. But let's get over this and actually have people discuss what they're going to do and how they're going to treat our country if they're elected. That's the thing
Sure.
that doesn't get talked about in politics anymore. And to me,
Yeah.
it's the only issue.
Yeah.
And so it drives me nuts.
It's like if to be a politician, you have had to have a perfect record throughout your entire life. Like, can you think of something you did when you were 20?
This is why it's
21?
not attracting good people.
Exactly. Like, if you have to be this perfect person, there's something wrong with you, right? If you lived your entire life that way. You know?
Yeah, like, listen, racism is a spectrum, dude.
Yeah.
This idea that you're either racist or not
No,
is
it's stupid.
completely
It's
absurd,
stupid.
dude.
First of all, I have some interesting ideas about racism. Everyone is innately, inherently.
That's provable.
Exactly. Tribally,
That's
like
provable.
you look like me, therefore I like you more.
I
right?
accept you better.
Exactly. So,
Yeah, more
like,
easily.
why are we not talking about that? We just have to learn that that's not a good reason to discriminate against people. But the reality is, like, I asked Kevin this the other day. I was like, "Your parents, do they have any friends who aren't white?" And he's like, "Actually, no." I'm like, "So how could
They do now?
They
Not,
do
not
now.
as much when I was growing up.
Right. So, like, how could they ever be expected to treat someone who doesn't look like them in the same way?
It's unrealistic.
Exactly.
It's
You can't.
completely unrealistic.
But once you break that down, you have a friend who looks different from you, then you're like, oh, they're all people like me.
Yeah.
That starts with the experience, right? Like, you think about racism, like you think about movies like American History X.
Sure.
That's true for life too, right? I don't know if you've seen that movie.
I've seen it, yeah.
Edward Norton, he goes to prison and he was a neo-Nazi.
Sure.
Then he meets an actual black person and he's like, oh,
They're talking about girlfriends or
exactly.
whatever, doing
They're like
laundry.
connecting like people.
like, yeah,
and then
you're
you're
funny.
like, oh, you're a person. I've been
Yes.
wrong this whole time. That's all it takes. For every person who's racist, it's not that there's something wrong with them. They just haven't had that connection yet. That's what I
There's
think
something,
about it.
this is why the idea of labeling people is so dangerous.
It is absolutely.
It's like
Yeah.
you need a label.
Yeah.
You're pale, stale, and male. Like, how racist is that?
Yeah, exactly.
That's racist, sexist,
It
and
is.
ageist.
It is. It is. There's so much racism towards white people right now.
Yeah,
People are not
I
talking
mean,
about it.
you know
Yeah.
what? And so there's a lot of negativity towards men as well.
That's true. Yeah.
But that there should be actually. Our society's
To
actually
get to balance is what people say, but I
no.
don't know.
What people don't understand is that, and this is my own theory.
Yeah.
If we're going to adversarially
Of
argue
course.
this or whatever, but
well, there's no adversary.
society is set up to protect women from men. That's how it's set up. If you think about how it is, all right. For example, you take the carding issue. Okay, so this is what are you talking about? Society set up to protect women from men.
Yeah.
And what are you talking about carding for? Well, so you say, well, the police are stopping people of color and carding them, right? Okay, let's forget about that for a second, because what's happening is police are interacting with men.
Right. That's a good point.
Okay? So if you're a man, you're way more likely to have a negative interaction with police
That's true.
than if you are a woman.
That's true.
And if you're a man out on the street at night, you are a perpetrator. What are you doing out here? Oh, he's a white guy. He's less like whatever happens. And so there's like this idea that, oh, this issue is an issue. Well, actually,
There's a
if
bigger
you,
issue
there's
behind it.
it's not an issue.
Yeah,
it's just that men are dangerous.
Right.
If you look at it, they're dangerous, especially when they're out at night. Right? Now, I'm not saying carding is right. I'm not saying it's wrong. But there's an issue where you have police negative interactions with police are 90 whatever percent with violent men. And the reason they're interacting with them in that way is to protect society from them. Men are dangerous. That's what it is. And are there women that are dangerous? Absolutely, there are women that are dangerous. But if we look at our jail statistics and everything else, 95% of the people that are in jail are men. Right? So our entire society is actually set up to protect women from men. Now they're saying we want to edit this protection to allow us to have different kinds of careers, right? So that's being changed, right? So you're allowed to do this now or whatever. Now we're going to change this law. Now we're going to put these new things in place that allow you to become more engineers or more less. But they don't want to be fishermen in the Alaskan Ocean, right? So there's extremes where the equality, this idea of that I think there's a fundamental difference, and I know we're down a bad path, weird path on a podcast, but you look at society, there's some real differences that we're pretending aren't there. People are not racist or not racist. They're on a spectrum.
Right.
And what's allowed on that spectrum? What's acceptable? right? So, for example, someone moves to Uxbridge because they want to live in a community that's mostly white.
Yep.
Right? Now, I hate to say that, but there's probably a lot of people that move to Uxbridge for that exact reason.
That makes sense.
Right?
Just that they're not allowed to talk about it that way.
Yeah.
People live in Brampton. A lot of brown people there. They live with their brown folks.
Yeah.
People live in Markham.
Yeah.
So, like, why is that a problem?
That's a
Everything
racist
else-
choice.
Exactly. It's not racist.
Well,
It's
it depends
just-
what you
it's
mean.
Natural.
They're choosing it based on wanting to be around a majority of people that share their ethnicity and
That's
cultural
it.
heritage.
That's it. And you know what?
Is that wrong?
No.
Well, it's wrong for white people.
It's wrong for everyone. Or it's either wrong for everyone or it's wrong for no one.
Right,
Exactly.
or is that
And that's
or is
fair.
that below the bar? Is that on the acceptability bar? Right, that's the
But
question.
it has to be across the board. That's the thing, right? It's not just for one race. It has to be good. What's good for one has to be good for everyone.
But what?
Right?
So on that spectrum, there has to be something allowed.
Right.
Right, because people are this way, and it's not like it's not possible for people to change it.
Yeah.
I don't think.
Let me point something out too. So in my university, there is something called the South Asian Association,
Okay.
where they celebrate being brown. Can you imagine if there was an association for white people at a university? Why is that not allowed?
Or
It'd
even
be
an
an uproar.
association for men.
Right, exactly. But the thing about these things, like, how can you have one and not the other? How is that fair? Think about that, right?
It's not about fairness. See, what it is it's about the cultural zeitgeist at the moment.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
It's not. It's just in the particular time we are. There's an attack on this particular group, and so it's okay.
Yes.
So in the past, it was let's dress up in blackface and make a comedy show to make fun of black people and keep them in their place.
Right.
Right? Now it's like, let's make fun of these other group of people and put them in their place.
Right. It is like that. You're
And
right.
that's a passive aggressive violent act, actually, in a sense. And our society's putting up with it, and
well, you're seeing a backlash already now.
there is, and
Yes.
it's a dangerous backlash
It is.
too. Actually,
The backlash is always dangerous, and that's why you have to be very careful about marginalizing people in general.
exactly. And taking away, it's interesting because I've done this podcast and I've had a host of different people in here, different backgrounds, everything. And I've talked about white privilege and I've talked about cultural appropriation, and the feelings are real. But I've listened to their podcast or their talk, and when they're with their group, they speak one way.
Of course.
But when they're sitting in front of the honky from Uxbridge, they speak a
It's
different way.
It's so interesting, right? That's like a lack of honesty is the way I look at it. Like, you can attest to this. I speak the same way to people because, I mean, if you act one way in one group, you're being dishonest.
Exactly.
Because you're not saying what you actually think, right?
Or you're saying what you really think.
In one scenario, but
Yes.
not in another, right?
Yes.
Yeah, it's interesting.
And so there's something about that. Like and so when they actually sit with me and I listen to them and we talk, there's a bond that's forged.
That's right. That's right.
Things change. All of a sudden, I'm not a faceless, nameless white person in the world that is. I mean, the most ridiculous thing I think that is asserted in all of our culture is that somehow people are sitting, white people or any group is sitting around creating machinations about how they're going to continue to control the world.
It's the most ridiculous idea.
It's really ridiculous.
Right. But some people believe it in the same.
Yes.
Those are the same people who are like, the system is rigged. This is rigged. They're looking for excuses of why they're not succeeding.
They're wallowing in their
That's
victimhood
right.
or something like
That's
that. In the greatest country with the most freedoms and the most wealth ever.
So
to
much
exist.
opportunity.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think
attitude.
entrepreneurship cures that.
I think so. I think you're right. Because
like-
you have to. You have to.
If you're going to be an entrepreneur in Toronto and you want to only white people to work for you, good luck with that.
Yeah,
pal.
right. It's never going to happen.
It's never going to happen,
Never gonna
man.
happen,
You're not going to
exactly.
have enough
That
people
is a
coming
good
in the
point.
door.
That's an interesting way to
It's
look
just
at
not
it.
going to happen. You're
Right.
going to have to interact with all
Right.
business with all different people. It's a wonderful. Actually, Toronto's probably a wonderful leading light of the world of integration. Actually, in a sense.
Yeah.
How do we bring this back to your music?
Hey, it's been fun talking. It's
Yeah,
really-
for
it's
sure.
really-
I'm trying to remember the name of the band here. What is
Artful
it?
Vandelays.
Artful Vandelays. How did that
Yes.
name come about?
Kevin, you have to tell his story.
Oh well, this was very old. I don't remember the specifics, but naming a band is one of the most difficult processes you can go through. Like I know you have children. You had to name your children. Was that an easy process, or did you kind of have
We
some
split
back
it
and
up.
forth?
So my wife named the first, I named the second, she named the
Okay.
third, I named the
So,
fourth.
so that's a
And
great
your kids
strategy.
know that. Your kids know that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
It's a great strategy. Not one that works with a band. But when you have two people trying to name something, that's hard enough. When you have four people,
Yeah.
you're in a whole nother world. And
Sure.
it's like somebody will
Yeah,
put
right.
something forward that they think is great, and that gets shot down. And eventually, I think this one came about because I don't know exactly. It's a bit of a Seinfeld illusion with Art
Vandelay. I was going to say Vandelay.
So so I don't really know how it came across, but I think I just put forward almost like a joke name, Artful Vandelays. I'm like because we were talking about Seinfeld at the time. I'm like, here's a band name, like, and everybody just seemed to be like,
can you watch Seinfeld
cool.
now?
Oh yeah, I still think I enjoy.
When's
it.
the last time you watched a Seinfeld episode?
Probably 4 to 5 months ago.
Kevin's
really?
He's a
Okay.
big Larry David fan in general. though,
Okay.
right? It's so I guess
Yeah.
it's
I actually watch Curb Your Enthusiasm more often than I watch
Okay.
Seinfeld these days. But
But that at that time the band was I wasn't even part of this band. It was like Kevin and 2 other people. It was already named when I joined.
Okay.
And now Kevin and I are Kevin is the only original member of this band, and we still have this name. So it's almost like we just carried along with us.
Do you
Well,
still
here's
have
the
the
funny part.
music? Do you still have the old music? Do you guys still play the old music?
Not. I mean,
so we
not
did at
really.
our so some of it at our first show back, we decided we'd go back through the catalog and
Yeah,
at
it's
least
like
play
early
some
stuff.
from really early stuff. So we played the first Vandalay song that was ever written. We made sure we played that
Sure.
at our like comeback show, and we spanned the ages a little bit. So we made sure to include everything a little bit.
Where do you guys play?
But,
Where?
Yeah, where
Oh
venues?
yeah, so we played at Junction City Music Hall
Okay.
because we have some friends who live in the Junction. I had been there, and it was just a cool place. And the promoter reached out to us on Instagram, and I'm like, we've been reaching out to other venues, and this guy asked us, and I'm like, that's nice. And then I
Yeah.
spoke to him, Mike
Sure.
Kowalski, great guy. And he's like, he's a businessman in music, doing some really interesting things. And I have so much respect for people who are trying to change the way that things are going.
Mm-hmm.
And so we play the show there, and we're definitely going to play there again. But our next show is at the Boat, which is a place like we can play anywhere. The one thing I realized booking shows before is that the band is the product. We used to think about it like, oh, we want to play the stage. It would be so nice if they would let us. But no, you're there. You're bringing people. That bar would be empty if you were not there, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're actually doing the promoter a favor. And once you realize that, everything changes, right? You're now booking your own shows. So many bands don't book their own shows because they don't think they can. We only play shows when we book the entire night. We select the bands that are playing with us. We do it all ourselves, right? We pay the bands. We pay them fairly. We don't collect a booking fee because we're also getting paid as a band. So normally there's a promoter books the night. They get a cut of all the money at the door, and the bands get less. So when we book a show, every band gets paid a fair amount for their audience, right? So that's a lesson learned. But yeah, we can play any venue. It's just a matter of whether the promoter is willing to play ball.
But our
with us.
current goals, like we said, like we really want to make this an experience. Like when you come to our show, we want people to be there and be a community and get
Right.
together. And so for us, like we don't want to play a 500 person venue and have 300 people show up and have 200. We would rather play like 150, 200 person venues and sell it out.
Yeah,
every
you want
time.
to rock it
and
out.
Yes,
have it be just
totally.
like
And
a
only
great
play with
experience
bands that
for
we
everybody.
know and like. You know, so many shows you go to, there's like 4 bands, they don't know each other.
Sure.
They show up for their thing and they leave. Now, we are all friends with these bands that we
Sure.
play with. So we're there for the whole night with them. You know what I mean? So it's like 150 people the whole time. That never happens. Usually it's like 50 people. They leave 50 people. They leave
Yeah,
50
yeah,
people,
yeah.
right? It's not like that at our shows, right? Because we're building a community. We only invite bands that we know and love to play with us because they're on the same wavelength.
You know, it's funny. You know, it's like you guys ever heard of Peter Drucker? He's like the first management consultant of all time.
Oh yeah, he wrote a book, Managing Oneself.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yes,
I
know
think
that.
so. I think
it's
you
a short
will,
book.
But
Yeah.
he's the one. He says there's only 3 questions you need to ask.
Right.
Who is the customer?
Right. That's a good question to ask, right? Exactly.
Right. That's a
Yeah.
great question
Yeah,
for a
right,
band. Like,
right, exactly.
right. Who is the customer?
Right.
Is the customer the promoter?
Right.
Is the customer the audience?
Right.
Or is the audience the product?
That's so funny.
Yeah.
Because like when you were starting out, you think the customer is the promoter, but then you realize, I mean, in some ways,
I don't know. I'm asking you.
You know?
I would say the customer is the audience for sure.
The audience.
Like,
What does the audience want to buy? What does the customer want to buy?
they want to have a good time. That's look. Why do you think live shows are dying? They have DJs have taken over.
Yeah.
Because it's way easier for them to have a good time because the music doesn't stop. It just keeps going, keeps going.
Sure, sure.
Whereas with a band, you play a set, 20-minute lull, play a set. It's not necessarily dancey music. People want to dance. They want to meet people. They want to have a good time.
They want to
right?
hear music they know as well. And if you
Exactly. Yeah,
go
that's
to,
the
a
cover
local
for no
night,
Exactly.
yeah, if you go to a
Right.
like a local band night, you're gonna see 4 or 5 bands, and you're gonna know none of the music.
Yeah.
It's harder to feel personally engaged because you want that moment in a night where you can just be like, I know this one,
this
I can
one.
sing
Wanna
along.
sing along,
You
yeah.
want to feel like a part of it.
So-
yeah.
This is why for our next show, I'm like, guys, we're going to do something different. We've never in our life ever played a cover song before. We'd only ever play originals. And after that last show, and I was like, guys, we're going to play another show in 3 months. I'm not going to do the exact same thing again. We have to do something different. And what I want to do is play a cover set of 10 songs that we're going to do as covers. and then we're going to play our set afterwards. So we're playing 2 sets.
And then that's going to be followed up by like a DJ dance night.
'cause
So
that's
the whole thing is going to be like an event night.
An event. So you stay for the whole night. You have a good time. You bring your friends, right? And the 10 songs we're doing, there's like a lot of pop songs that we would never hear us listening to, right? So it's going to change.
Are you going to make your own version of them?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
So basically, they'll hear that song. They'll be like, "Oh, but this is a Vandelays version, right?" I can hear now why they do that with this song and stuff like that. Yeah.
So we'll start the set with familiar music, then we'll play our originals, and then at the end of the night it's going to be DJ dance for all more songs you know, and now it's...
And that's November 16th at the Boat for anyone who's watching. It's going to be a good time.
The Boat.
The Boat is in Kensington,
Kensington Market.
We used to have a rehearsal space in this garage in Kensington Market, so it's very near and dear to us.
It's got sentimental value for us, that neighborhood. That was
such a great spot, too.
Yeah, Kensington's nice, man. That area is a nice spot. It's kind of a unique thing next to Chinatown. There.
Exactly. It's so weird. It's so Toronto.
Yeah, it is a Toronto vibe,
right.
isn't it? Yeah, Kensington. I haven't been downtown in ages. I got to get down there. Oh, actually, no. I went a couple weekends ago with my kids. I took them to the CN Tower, but that's not downtown, really.
No, it's the heart of it, if you think about it. Yeah,
I don't know. Going to the CN Tower is not
not
like
the fun
walking
part.
down
It's not the fun part.
You know what I
exactly.
mean? Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, where can people find your guys' music? They want to. Is it on Spotify and all that kind of thing?
Yes. So we have some old stuff on Spotify, but we're releasing a song November 1st. It's going to be a single.
It'll be our first release since kind of getting back together. So our first new products. So I think our last release was like 2010, technically.
Yes, exactly.
So new stuff is coming real soon. November 1st, we're going to have our first single coming out.
And we're going to hope to have every 3 months have a new single come out. And yeah, on our website, artfulvandelays.ca, we have a bunch of our old catalog as well that you can stream and listen to. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of a process that we're working out exactly what we want to do. But the strategy is in process for that.
I like the idea of looking at it like a business. It's a lot of people, I think there's something about projecting the idea of the starving artist is unhealthy.
Yeah.
It's like, I just do this because I love it. I feel like I've talked to people like that, and I feel like saying to them, nah, man, you got to look at it a different way. Because if you don't charge for something, or you can't charge for something, I'm going to say this, and maybe people are going to get mad at me, but if by definition it has no value.
That's exactly right.
By definition.
Absolutely right.
Well, I think that's a difference in mindset after taking a break from this and coming back as a band, right? It's like we all started not necessarily thinking that way, but you get back together and you realize, okay, it's not about being a starving artist anymore. We've actually all now crafted lives in a way where we can do what we do in our everyday lives. You can have your families, we can have full-time jobs, but we can still make this.
But Brian, who is their guitarist in our band, is currently his wife is currently in labor with their second kid.
Hey, Brian.
Currently,
Get it
Brian.
going.
Hope everything's going well, man. I know what that's like.
Yeah, so
I've been to that rack 4 times.
4 times. You're a pro.
The last one
Any
we had at
advice?
home.
Any advice for Brian? Sorry to
Having
interrupt.
kids, advice.
But the labor in that part.
You know what? I'll give people advice for fatherhood is just be humble, man.
Yeah.
They're their own people. They're not
right.
representations of
That's
you.
right. Hard to let go of that.
Really is, man. A lot of people, I've had 4 kids, and I learned this lesson. Being an entrepreneur, it's funny, my journey has had a lot of humility.
Yeah.
Smashed into me, being a father really young. I was married young, entrepreneur young. And one of the most important things about raising kids is understanding that they are not representations of who you are. And don't live through them, man. Let them have their own journeys, man.
That's how resentment happens.
Yeah,
exactly.
dude. It's like you have this, if they don't believe what you believe, who knows what they're going to believe in 10 years later.
And that resentment could go in either direction or both directions, right?
Yeah,
It's
dude. It's like you try it. Don't get into that loop. We talked about that cycle of negative interactions with your kids or with your spouse or whatever. Love the people you love.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If you love them, love them.
You know what a good relationship looks like? It looks like people talking to each other. If you have a relationship with your kids where you talk to each other and you continue that forever, that's success.
Yeah.
That's successful parenting. Nothing else, right? Like a relationship. I know there's some relationships with parents and kids. I have 9 siblings.
Wow.
My parents are very Catholic. So
You're from Goa, India, probably.
I'm
or
Sri
somewhere.
Lankan.
Sri
There's
Lankan.
a small minority of
Wow.
people are Catholic. My brother is a priest.
Okay.
That's how religious they are.
Sure.
They didn't believe in birth control. So so
sure.
they have 10 kids, and some the ones that followed in my dad's footsteps the most with the religious stuff, they have 0 relationship with him. They can't talk to him, right? And me, I veered the farthest from it, and I can talk to my parents like everything is cool, right?
Yeah.
But that's just a relationship you foster because I don't have the resentment that they have.
Yeah.
I didn't listen to them. So
Sure.
I don't resent anything about that, right?
Yeah.
So it was a perfect recipe. It worked out well, but that I've emulated that now with my kid. I'm like, if I try to get you to do things, and even if you do them, you're going to resent me for this later.
I always tell this to people. Who cares what happened in 1985?
Right. Exactly.
I mean, honestly.
Yeah, right. If you can't let that go.
No, so,
you're
I
never
mean,
gonna have a
bad things
relationship.
happen
Right.
to people, like really
Exactly.
bad things. Your parents can do stupid things to you that hurt you.
Yeah.
But there's still, your kids can really be rebellious and hurt you. I have 2 teenagers now. I'm seeing it right now. It's tough.
Not looking forward to that.
But I mean, it's especially today with the social media and the Instagram, it's tough for the kids now, man. There's a lot of weird shit that goes on social media, man, with the, they bring it home with them. And they got it on their phones going all the time. You know what I mean? It's wild. So I would say, humility is the number one thing that you should, if you love them, let them be who they are.
Humility, that word means so many different things to so many people. Like, what would you say that means to you, humility?
That's a great question. I think a lot of people know what it's not.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the difference between pornography and art.
Right.
You know hubris when you see it.
Right.
I think humility is like the acceptance of, that's interesting. That's a great question. Humility is like the acceptance of your personhood and other people's personhood in the world. Like, it's like you interact with other people in a way that like, I had a coach that helped me. I used to be in my ego, is what I call it.
Everyone is.
And Mike Tyson is the best to speak. If you listen to the Joe Rogan podcast between Mike Tyson and Joe Rogan, that is unbelievable. Like, Mike Tyson's wrestling tigers. I want to wrestle tigers. I'm champion of the world. How many tigers? I want 6 tigers.
Yeah.
He's out in his underwear wrestling tigers. Like, he's in peak ego, right?
Yeah, right.
But he's the champion of the world and this sort of stuff. But I mean, you have to have your ego. You have to follow your ego in a way, because your ego points you to where success is, in a sense. But if you're in your ego, you're not following it anymore. Now you're sort of susceptible to manipulation. Like, politics now is like a giant form of ego validation. Like, Donald Trump is an expression of 40% of America's ego.
Yeah.
That's what it is. And when you find someone in their ego, I'm going to go back to the humility in a second. When you find someone in their ego, there's only 2 things you can do. You can validate or go into conflict.
Right.
And that's exactly what's happening in the United States politics right now.
So Twitter loves Donald Trump.
Yeah, it's an ego
It's
it's an expression of America's collective ego, of the right, or whatever it is.
I think it's a double whammy there, because it's one half loves it for the collective ego, and the other half loves it because they're just waiting for the Schadenfreude. They're just waiting for the fall.
You
right?
either
and they're
either
getting, that's why there's a
validate
post
or
every
you're
day
in
about how
conflict.
he's going down this time, right? And everybody.
That's actually really interesting.
So it's like both sides are actually loving this right
Love
now,
it.
because one gets their ego stroked and the other is waiting for that Schadenfreude moment where they can be like, "Ha,
We got him.
yeah. exactly."
And Trudeau is Trump is an overt egotistical narcissist.
Yes.
Justin
Absolutely.
Trudeau is a covert egotistical narcissist.
Interesting.
So he's an expression of Canada's inferiority complex on the world stage. That's what my belief.
That's fascinating.
So like what people that vote for Trudeau want someone who's going to turn heads in Washington and Beijing and London. That's
see
what
what
they
you're saying.
want. He's got the
He's
white
a poster boy.
Yeah, they
right,
want
right.
wow, Justin Trudeau, TMZ's following him. Like, there's a lot of Canadians that just want the Prime Minister of Canada to be visible on the world stage. I mean, you take Stephen Harper, he took his head off, you might find a computer inside.
He was a robot. Yeah,
I mean, the guy was a
Absolutely,
robot, but
yeah.
Canadian, it's kind of good for Canada to kind of hide out a little bit.
Yeah.
To be
For their
boring,
economy
just
especially,
hang out, just keep it quiet. But in terms of humility, I think people know it when they see it. For me, it's really in a way, it's sort of accepting yourself first, having compassion for yourself. So that means you screw up, you make mistakes, you offend people, you apologize, you accept people the way they are, you allow them to screw up, you allow them to make amends, and it's about leaving the past behind. That's why the whole brown face thing with Trudeau. I mean, who cares what happened in 1985?
Yeah. And if you treat it with humility, you've made mistakes.
Yeah.
So you treat them the same way you'd want to be treated.
And the next day I came in, I was just like, oh man, I'm just like, I can't believe I felt that way. And
But
I don't like
that's-
Justin Trudeau. I
that's-
wouldn't vote
yeah.
for the guy. I think
Right.
he's a bad leader, but I didn't like the way I felt in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I felt like that I was happy that something bad happened to him, and that really made me feel awful about who I'm trying to be as a person. You know,
it's such a natural gut shot reaction.
But now
you have to stop yourself.
Yeah. And you have the humility, though, to step outside and recognize that about yourself, right?
that's part of it, right?
Because you're never going to be able to avoid those feelings entirely.
No.
But being able to accept it and realize that that was not a positive thing for you, and being able to grow from that is the most important thing you can have.
Not only that, but a lot of people have a bad relationship to feelings. So it's interesting. Feelings are not good or bad.
Right.
They're benign. They're just signals from the universe that you need to do something,
Right.
or something needs to change, or to be alert about something. So jealousy is a signal.
Right.
Now, some people obsess in jealousy, but jealousy is actually a very healthy emotion.
It's telling you something.
Yeah, it's telling you protect what you have, protect what you have, protect what you have, right? And a lot of, like jealousy and envy are actually opposites. They're actually opposites of one another.
Yeah, right.
Envy is a perverted obsession with what others have.
And jealousy is trying to protect, like, you don't want someone to take what you have.
Exactly.
Right,
They're actually kind of opposite feelings.
People don't realize that they're different
No.
words. Exactly.
I never thought of it that way, to be honest.
That's actually what the definition. Envy is like, it's not like you're jealous of someone because they have something. No, you're envious of them because they have something. You're only jealous because you have something you don't want someone else to take.
Envy is like a covetousness.
That makes a lot of sense.
That's right.
You know, and you would know this from your Catholicism.
The Bible. I was just going to say.
Well, you know what I mean? Look, Jordan Peterson's brought the Bible back, man.
Yeah.
Big
It's like
time,
crazy. He's
man.
telling you stories about
Who
archetypes.
thought you could do a lecture series on the Bible
Very
and
interesting
get
stuff, I gotta
millions
say.
of views?
Very
right?
interesting
Like,
stuff.
You know what I mean? I love that guy. I listen to
love that
all
guy
of
too,
his
honestly.
stuff, man.
And he's not supposed to say that, apparently, because people judge
You know what?
for it.
You know what? You're not. I refuse to be labels. I wish I called this the No Label podcast,
Exactly.
man. Don't label me.
Yeah.
You know, I like Jordan Peterson. He's got a message of hope.
Yeah.
I think he needs a new album.
Yeah.
New album, yeah.
That's what I've been saying for a while,
But
too.
if that's his
Yeah.
message, I mean, why stray away from it just for the sake of creating a new album?
Yeah,
Like Gary
good
Vee
point.
says this all the
Exactly.
time. He's like, this is what my message is. Why would I change it just to appease people, right?
And in his case too, it's like he clearly thinks about things a lot.
Oh, yeah.
And doesn't put them forth till he's really thought about them.
Sure.
So it's like he probably spent 20 years creating this message he's put out. So for us to expect him to be like, all right, what's your next message?
Exactly. He's like, well, I
It's
guess I
like-
agree with that.
It's like, well, I can throw it out. Like that's like the band that
sophomore
gets signed.
slump.
The band that
sophomore
gets signed to a
slump.
recording, like
Exactly.
big record contract.
They
They
had
have a
20
first album that was a hit because they
years, it was
spent
like
10
that.
years writing it.
Exactly.
And their album, the label's like, we need the next album next year. Let's go. And they're like,
They call it
1
sophomore
year?
slump, right?
Okay.
That's
Yeah.
why the Beatles were so unbelievable,
Yes,
actually.
they're very prolific. And
Same with the
right.
Stones, but I mean the Beatles are in the class all their own. Like how many
absolutely.
great songs are
So
they
many,
write?
man,
Unbelievable.
so many.
But you know they spent a lot of time in Hamburg just singing. I didn't
They
realize.
have the Cavern Bar. That's
Yeah,
what it was
somewhere they
earlier on.
would play 5-hour sets.
yeah, they would do cover
They just
songs all
hone
night.
their-
over
they
and
hone their
over
craft,
and
exactly.
over and over and over for whatever amount of time. Crazy. Guys, I don't know how long we've been. Scotty, how long have we been talking here?
$1.20.
That's good. I think it's a good time to call it. What do you guys think?
Yeah, sure. Honestly,
Hey,
yeah, it's been
all
fun.
right. Well, so it's the Artful Vandelays. What's the website?
Artfulvandelays.ca.
Artfulvandelays.ca. That's VANDELAYS.ca.
That's correct.
Go there, check them out, guys. And they're playing November.
Instagram. Add us on Instagram. That's the way. That's where.
That's
we
you
want
right
it.
there.
Instagram, just Artful Vandelays on Instagram. Add us. That's where we post most of our content. You'll get all that stuff there. Websites. Who goes to websites anymore? I don't know. I don't go to websites.
I do
Yeah.
sometimes.
Yeah. It's antiquated. But
Once
It
you
is.
put the link in your bio, then maybe
That's
you
right.
know.
You know what I mean? A lot
When's
of
the last
people. A
time
lot
we-
of people buy a lot of stuff off Amazon.
Oh yes, exactly. But on
Amazon
my app.
passed our website.
Yeah, I do it on my
terms
app,
of sales.
though, right? That's why it's like I'll use the Amazon app on my phone. I don't go to the website on my computer.
I got news for you, folks. Amazon is the most expensive place to buy light bulbs.
It's so true. It's so true. Actually, they make some good margin there, man. You can buy a lot of things.
Oh, we
cheaper
sell
than
for
Amazon.
about 10 times more on Amazon than we do on our website. So if you
10
want to buy light bulbs,
times.
go to atlaslighting.ca.
That's right.
No, I'm not kidding you, dude.
That's good. That's actually important. Same with like Bandcamp selling or like streams on Spotify. You don't make any money off of that. But if you buy the album.
So if you go to amazon.ca, you're paying more, not less. But anyway, that doesn't matter really.
But you're
all that
making
much.
Jeff Bezos a happy man.
You know what? There's a guy who got in his ego, man.
That's right. Well,
There's a
lot-
guy who
lot
got
of
in his ego.
entrepreneurs. Lot
Well,
of
you know what? Separated at birth, right? Dr. Evil and Jeff Bezos. Think about how much they
Wow.
look alike.
That's hilarious. Well, Dr.
You know what Jeff
a little
Bezos is like? Put them
Yeah.
beside
Yeah,
each
yeah,
other with
yeah,
the
yeah.
Jeff Bezos even has the
Yeah,
lazy
yeah,
eye,
yeah,
dude.
it's
Picture him holding a cat, and you're good.
Separated at birth. $1 million.
So would he be Dr. Good though? That's up
No,
for
he's
debate.
Dr. Evil. He's Dr. Evil for sure. Come on,
Yin
man.
and yang. I don't know.
Look at that.
There it is.
Separated at birth.
Oh my goodness!
I'm telling you,
Wow.
man.
Okay, I can see the.
That's pretty good.
There's a lot on the internet about this. Okay,
Yeah, no, separated at birth.
dude,
bro.
I really like that photo where they put his head on the gray one right in the middle there, like row 3. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. There you
I was
go.
picturing
That's
this in my head, and it made a lot of sense. But if you are not seeing this, you need to go and just
look
Google
it up.
the comparison because it's
Thank
way
you for
more
that,
striking
Scott.
than it could
Much
possibly be in your head.
No, it's actually unbelievable.
I was having a hard time imagining it. I
No,
was like,
I could
okay.
picture it, but not on the level that it actually is.
It's
Holy
actually
crap.
unbelievably uncanny that he looks like Dr. Evil.
It's like Mike Myers knew.
Yeah, he is.
It's like he knew.
I'm calling it, folks. If you want to start your own podcast, if you want to create some digital media, hey, why not, man? Come on down to Get a Grip Studios, Victoria Park and Steeles if you're in Toronto, or you can go to getagripstudios.com, fully virtual. That's right. You can record your podcast in high definition and all that kind of stuff over the internet to anyone else in the world. That's the kind of time we live in, like Greek gods. It's unbelievable, actually, when you think about it.
Mm-hmm.
It really is. If you went back to the Parthenon, steps of the Parthenon, and said, hey, yo, Socrates, you know where I come from? We have these little boxes on the wall that release hot air or cold air and make the room the perfect temperature that humans want to exist at. And we live in the frozen north, and
right.
all of human knowledge is in my hand today. It's unbelievable when you think about it. So remember, folks, it's the best time to be alive,
That's
not the
right.
worst time to be
That's
alive.
absolutely right.
It's the most freedoms you've ever had, not the least freedoms you've ever had. Everything that you think, everything you're told out there, it's actually the opposite is true. So why not tell everybody by going to getagripstudios.com and starting your own podcast, folks. Thanks for listening. Bye for now.
Thank you for having us, man.
No, man.
This has been so much fun.
No, my pleasure, man. My pleasure.
Yeah.